Day one of voluntary minicamp just happened in Cleveland, and I genuinely cannot sit on this without talking about it because what Shedeur Sanders did on that field today is the kind of thing that cuts through months of noise and debate and media narrative and just replaces all of it with a single concrete fact. Not a rumor, not an insider report, not a carefully worded press conference answer decoded through 17 layers of GM speak interpretation. An actual performance on an actual football field against actual NFL personnel, and the performance was legitimately impressive in ways that deserve honest examination rather than either hype or dismissal. Here's the football first, because the football is the whole story. Todd Monken gave Shedeur Sanders 11 on 11 reps on the first day of voluntary minicamp. Full personnel, real defensive pressure, live competitive looks with nowhere to hide and nothing cushioning the evaluation. This wasn't a skeleton drill or a choreographed walkthrough designed to let the quarterback look good without revealing anything meaningful. This was the actual test, the one that shows you where a quarterback's mental operation is, how fast the pre-snap read processes, how quickly the post-snap confirmation happens, whether the decision triggers in time to actually matter. And in those reps, on day one, Shedeur completed 80% of his passes. I want to slow down and give that number the space it deserves because I think people are going to skim past it and miss what it actually means in context. 80%. Day one of voluntary minicamp. First real competitive reps of the offseason, without the benefit of weeks of training camp repetitions building momentum toward a performance peak, without the context of a preseason game where defenses are installing and not yet fully executing. Against an NFL defense in an 11 on 11 structure, on the first morning of the first voluntary session, most quarterbacks, including good ones, don't operate at that efficiency level until they've had weeks to build familiarity with a new system and find their competitive rhythm inside it. Shedeur walked in from the offseason and immediately operated at a level that should shift how people are talking about where he actually is as a player right now. And it wasn't just the percentage, it was the quality of the throws that produced it. This is the detail I need you to understand because completion percentage alone doesn't tell you everything. A quarterback can post a high completion rate in practice by taking the path of least resistance on every rep, throwing checkdowns, finding the easy completion, managing the situation instead of attacking it. That produces clean numbers and tells you very little about whether the quarterback is actually operating with the decisiveness and timing that winning football requires. Shedeur was not doing that. He was throwing with aggression. He was trusting his reads and releasing the ball into tight windows before the coverage fully closed. He was making the kind of throws that only happen when the pre-snap identification was correct and the post-snap confirmation happened fast enough to actually act on it before the window collapses. Watch the specific plays circulating from this session, and the thing that stands out immediately is the processing speed. His eyes are moving through the coverage while his body is still loading into the throw. He's finding the leverage point in the defensive structure, cross-referencing it against what the pre-snap alignment told him, confirming that the route is developing into the space the read projected, and then the ball is out. The entire sequence happens in a window that gives a pass rusher no time to affect the delivery, which isn't luck. That's a quarterback whose mental operation is running slightly ahead of the physical play rather than catching up to it. That differential between processing ahead of the situation and processing reactively is one of the most consequential separators between quarterbacks who become franchise cornerstones and quarterbacks who cycle in and out of starting roles without ever fully arriving. Shedeur was processing ahead of the play today. That's what Monken's offense is built to reward, and that's what showed up in the numbers. The deep ball work was its own specific statement, and I want to address it directly because it responds to one of the most persistent threads of skepticism that has followed Shedeur since before the draft. The doubt about his arm, whether he has the strength and touch to create a vertical threat that changes how defenses align, that forces safeties to worry about the deep ball rather than committing downhill against the run in the quick game, that doubt has been part of the conversation for a long time. What happened on the field today was a direct and efficient rebuttal. He dropped back, used his natural leverage in the full extension of his release, and launched the ball downfield with touch and trajectory that put it into a window only the receiver could reach. The ball came down in the right spot. The receiver caught it. The play worked the way it was designed to work because the throw was exactly what the design required. Touch on a deep ball is actually a more revealing test than raw arm strength in isolation because it requires feel. The calibration of arc and pace based on where the receiver is running and where the coverage is positioned relative to the route. Shedeur showed that feel today. That's not something you can fake. The left side touchdown strike was the play that told the most complete story of all, and I want to walk through why. He scans left off the snap, identifies the window in the coverage, fires the ball into a specific spot, and the receiver catches it in stride with room after the catch. That sequence seems simple when you describe it. It isn't. Every element of functional quarterback play has to operate correctly simultaneously for that completion to happen. The pre-snap identification of the coverage, the post-snap confirmation that the route is developing into the expected space, the decision to commit, the timing of the release, the placement of the ball in the spot that allows the receiver to catch it without breaking stride. None of those elements can be late. None of them can be wrong. And they all have to happen together in sequence in real time against real NFL personnel who are being paid to prevent exactly this from happening. That completion happened because the quarterback was right on every step of the process. That's what functional offense looks like when the quarterback is operating correctly. Now, I need to talk about what Todd Monken is doing behind the scenes because there's a detail from his coaching approach in this first practice that deserves far more attention than it's been getting. He installed cameras on the quarterback's helmets, attached cameras to the helmet so that the coaching staff can literally watch the quarterback's visual field as he processes the coverage, see exactly where his eyes travel, in what sequence, at what pace, whether the scanning pattern matches what good processing is supposed to look like, and whether the decision that gets made on the field corresponds to what the visual processing should have produced. Think about the analytical depth of that investment for a moment. This isn't just coaching by watching a player from the sideline or reviewing traditional film. This is a head coach building a real-time diagnostic of how a quarterback thinks, using technology to create accountability for the mental process rather than just the physical output. When you combine that methodology with the rep distribution Monken has already described, with first-team looks concentrated toward one quarterback rather than diplomatically divided, the picture that forms is of a coaching staff that is genuinely all in on developing Shedeur Sanders to whatever his actual ceiling is and is using every available tool to get there. Shedeur spoke to the media after practice, and I think the substance of what he said deserves real engagement rather than being treated as boilerplate post-practice presser material. The enthusiasm he expressed about his relationship with Monken and the coaching staff had a quality to it that I don't think was performed. He wasn't diplomatically praising his coach the way players do when they're managing a professional relationship in public. He was describing something specific, a staff that approaches players as complete human beings first and then pushes them relentlessly in every aspect of preparation. That combination, trust and demand existing simultaneously rather than one being traded for the other, is what the best coaching relationships feel like from the inside. When a quarterback has genuine trust in his coaching staff, it shows in performance, in the willingness to make aggressive decisions, to throw into contested windows, to commit to a read even when the outcome is uncertain, without the hesitation that comes from not knowing whether the coaching staff will stand behind you through the mistakes that aggressive play inevitably produces. The willingness to be aggressive that Shedeur showed today in his completion profile is connected to the trust he was describing in his post-practice media session. Those things are not separate. The other thing he said to the media deserves direct engagement because it was unusually direct for a young quarterback in the early days of a new coaching relationship. He addressed the negative narrative about his readiness, the coverage that has questioned his ability, his preparation, his ceiling, and told the people generating it to redirect that energy toward actually supporting the team. That's a challenge, not a complaint. It's a quarterback who has been watching what's been said about him, who has processed it with apparent clarity about what it represents, and who is choosing to respond not with resentment, but with accountability. If you want this team to win, support it correctly. The directness of that response, delivered from a position of genuine confidence in what he just showed on the field, is the kind of thing that wins locker rooms more permanently than any statistical performance. It tells the people around him that he sees the situation clearly, that he's not confused about what's been happening or who's been doing it, and that he's decided the correct response is to perform and then call the narrative what it is. I want to pull back and look at the complete picture of what today means because a single practice performance, however encouraging, doesn't exist in isolation. It exists on top of everything that has been building in Cleveland since Shedeur arrived. The voluntary workout sessions he attended when attendance was genuinely optional and others weren't present, the captain role he's been growing into, the consistent daily presence that has been accumulating competitive currency with the coaching staff since the offseason program began. The locker room belief documented through the public statements of Myles Garrett and Denzel Ward. The rep distribution at Minicamp that showed him leading the first group while Watson worked with the third unit. the prospect who named him specifically by name after a formal organizational meeting. The organizational silence from Barry and Munkin that reads as strategic conclusion building rather than genuine uncertainty. All of that context surrounds today's performance and makes it land differently than the same performance would have landed without it. Because what today actually represented, at the level that matters most inside a competitive NFL environment, was a quarterback delivering to the people who are going to trust their professional seasons to him the confirmation that the preparation was real. Not verbal confirmation, not relationship confirmation, performance confirmation. The 80% completion rate didn't come from showing up on day one and trying hard. It came from showing up to every voluntary session when nobody required him to, from putting in the film study and the scheme installation and the rep work that produces the processing speed that showed up in those 11-on-11 looks today. When Shedeur's eyes were moving through the coverage faster than the play was developing, that wasn't talent spontaneously expressing itself. That was accumulated preparation converting into competitive advantage in real time. That's what preparation looks like when it's genuinely been done. The national conversation about this quarterback competition has maintained a version of genuine openness that I think is becoming increasingly difficult to justify honestly. The framing of Watson or Gabriel as realistic alternatives to Shedeur as the Cleveland starter in 2026 has required a particular kind of selective attention, one that emphasizes the formal competition structure while underweighting the informal evaluation that has been running continuously and consistently pointing in one direction for months. Today added something new to that informal evaluation: actual competitive performance in actual football conditions, producing results that can't be explained away through circumstance or context. 80% completion rate in 11-on-11 reps, including a downfield touch throw and a left side touchdown strike on day one of voluntary minicamp, is not a narrative. It's a data point, a very specific and very concrete data point. Cleveland has been carrying one of the most painful quarterback legacies in professional football for the better part of 20 years. The cycling through of hope and disappointment, the organizational inability to commit fully to a young quarterback at the moment that commitment was available and needed, the pattern of false starts that has defined the franchise's most important position for 2 full decades, all of that history is present as backdrop every time a new quarterback takes snaps in that building. What happened today didn't erase any of that history. A single practice performance can't carry that weight, but it contributed a specific and meaningful piece to the story that is being written in real time, a story that has been developing toward one particular conclusion with remarkable consistency across every dimension that matters. The building already knows where this is going. The minicamp rep distribution already showed it. The locker room voices already said it. And now Shedeur Sanders walked onto the practice field on day one of voluntary minicamp and showed it in the clearest possible language. Not through words, not through positioning, but through 80% completions and a deep ball dropped right into stride and a left side touchdown that happened because every piece of the process was exactly right. The doubts got torched, and the person doing the torching was the same person who has been building toward this moment through every voluntary session and every early morning and every film room hour since the day he arrived. Day one delivered. Now we see what the rest of this looks like.